and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duvall, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, if he won't be a prisoner of fate, will go and fulfill his destiny.
Tim Longo.
Yeah, that's a deep cut. Do you recognize?
I don't recognize it.
It is one of the saner things. It means nothing, and yet it is one of the saner things that is said in Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah.
If you won't be a prisoner of fate, go and fulfill your destiny. What? But then I would be a prisoner of What?
That's the best. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
You could probably just pick a quote from a Metal Gear game for the rest of the show forever.
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah.
And they would always be entertaining.
Yeah.
God, I love that series. For reasons like that. Oh, my goodness.
It's so mad. It's so nuts.
Some of it could have been localization too, but yeah.
That one in particular.
In that, yeah.
I just can't imagine an actress. It's a woman giving the lines. Probably Meryl. I don't remember though.
Not in 3. In 3, it would be Eva.
Wouldn't be Meryl. Meryl's in it.
Meryl in 3?
Yeah. She's
3.
got that. Yes.
Which takes place back in time.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. 4.
Oh, you're talking about 4. Okay. Yeah.
This whole time I've been talking about 4 and thinking 3. I don't know why. It's late. What can I say?
4.
Anyway,
yeah.
What are we here to talk about? Not
yeah. Let's talk about another Eastern game series, really.
Yep.
Ico. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, we spent an hour talking about it last week, and we got, through maybe 4 rooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, I mean, most of the stuff that we talked about certainly applied elsewhere, so it wasn't like it wasn't like it didn't fit. It just, we didn't get to nearly as many things as we thought we would.
And it is a relatively short game. I had forgotten. I haven't played it in so long. So playing it in 2 sessions was really doable overall. And we were talking generally
about... It took
me
around 5 hours this time, and I was going at a leisurely pace.
Yeah, I think I was like a little over 6, But yeah, I mean, last time we were talking mainly about pillars and kind of the general pieces of the game, and even talking room by room, there isn't that much really that is worth discussing in the details, because it's mainly puzzles and things, but and some interesting mechanical changes. But so what was one of the first things that you wanted to hit that we missed last time?
Well, for me, I think you see this in. I want to say that there's the first sort of puzzly room that you run into where you come in and there's a ladder, there's a jump down, and then across the way you can maybe push a block up and pull a switch to open a door so that she can come all the way around and then climb up on a block and get up to you and go to the next room. So this is it's like the second room. It's after the room with the sort of spider shadows, and it's like, right there at the beginning. And in that particular room, because it's also got the shadows coming out, so there's a little bit of combat once you open that door and she can move. What I loved about that is it kind of coalesced for me how the interactions with Yorda and the camera and the scale of the spaces all had to work together. Because when Yorda's in danger, the camera has to be able to pan to her so that you can see where she is.
Yeah.
So the camera needs, and when they've pulled the camera back as far as they have, of course, now they also need to make these spaces large, right? And for it to even make sense for you to even parse where she is, you can't have like tunnels and stuff. You have to literally just have these big open spaces that you can see kind of at a glance. And I just like how holistic that all is. Like, you sort of feel like maybe they started with a more traditional over-the-shoulder camera and were like, this doesn't work at all because we can't communicate, this important thing. So I sort of feel like once they had Yorda in and kind of working, that's when they probably discovered, we have to have the camera far enough away that it makes sense to follow back to where she is. And once you've done that, okay, now the spaces have to be big enough so that you can actually put the camera in them, and have them fit and be unobstructed. So I did really notice that very early in the game, and then throughout it just kind of kept coming back.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I noticed it in as a succinct way as you just said it there, but I did write a lot of notes. I think another funny telling aside, as I'm looking at my notes, like the amount of notes I wrote for these 2 sessions is equal to, like, I'm not going to get through all of them for the discussion, but it's equal to like all of Resident Evil or something like that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like there's just thing after thing that I had, some small, some large, that I had that I wanted to talk about. So I think that's telling as far as its significance and impact. But to your point about the holistic just design of all of that stuff kind of working together, it really is a good point. And something that I put a note down that relates to this kind of as a counter to some of my notes on negativity toward a certain camera, that just wasn't working, or some sort of, because we talked last time about trusting the camera, which is right. An important concept in this game. But one thing that we always run into as developers that is, I always need a reminder on this as a player, is we always focus on the times when things don't work. And right. we drill on into that stuff. But if you actually play this game and you take a step back and you think about how much is working, how many times the camera is exactly where you need it to be, how many times, like you said, the room scale and shape and size are exactly what they need to be, or seemingly, the flow of the camera, the path of the camera, it's... I mean, this second session, just... I was flabbergasted all over again. And the first few times I played it was when it, around when it came out. And so I'd never played it with, looking at it with such a critical eye, from a design perspective. And it really is, like, I don't want to use the B word, but it really is a pretty brilliant game. Like, it's really good.
It really is. Yeah.
And
I mean, that said, I mean, you talked about, I mean, I figured I knew where you got stuck with the camera. It would have been near the end of our session where he comes, there's the graveyard, and there's a lot of combat in the graveyard, and then you go into the next room, and you have to come into that twice. Once you come through, you jump on a chain, you go up, and you push a block so that you can open the doors permanently and pull her into this room. And at that point, you need to get up to this balcony above.
Yeah.
And the camera shows you that every time you go in there, and I just didn't interpret it.
Yeah,
it's the far right of the screen, it's things like that. And then the other one for me was in the the first reflector. I can't remember east from west, but the first reflector.
East.
That there's a open door on the right, but I couldn't see it because the camera doesn't quite cover that there's a gap like that you can get through.
Yeah,
and because you can't on the other side. My mind just filled in, I can't there.
Yeah.
And I've played this game several times. It's absurd that I would miss that. And when I did walk to her, I was like, oh, duh, every time I play this game, I miss this door, this space.
Yeah, it's usually a visual language problem or an optical illusion kind of feel, or a lighting issue, that it just isn't quite what it needed to be when I get stuck on that kind of stuff or unfair. And I remember the very first time I played the game, I actually recall putting it down multiple times because I was stuck in certain sections. And it's not that long of a game, but it took me forever to finish the game because in that kind of traditional adventure game kind of way, you get stuck on a puzzle and you just step away from it, like we talked about with Dot or something like that. And I was more persistent this time, and maybe had played it before, so I remembered a few things. But if you miss some of that stuff, you go insane.
Yeah,
because it's right there in front of you, and there's no, there's no.
Well, and I genuinely like to play his games that way, where I'll just put them down.
Yeah.
Like when I originally played Shadow of the Colossus, I did one Colossus at a time. So
that's pretty good.
and so it took me a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And that was how I played it. I just like an hour a night, or half hour, whatever, depending on the Colossus.
Yeah.
And as I played The Last Guardian, whenever I started feeling any frustration at all, I just say, you know what, I'm just going to put it down here, and I'll come back to it. and I just find that that's it might be a better way to play games generally. So I don't know. I mean, games that have a more of a physical angle, a physical player skill angle, you probably want to stick it out to a certain degree because you need to build up the skill.
Yeah, you lose that momentum.
Exactly. Like doing Super Mario Galaxy and having those last few levels that I had to get, with Luigi, to get all 151 stars, took about everything I could do with my crufty old hands. And if I didn't just stick at it, I never would have come back to it. So,
yeah. One of the other topics that we didn't get to hit last time was really talking about combat in general. And you had made a good point last time about, I was kind of throwing down the gauntlet a little bit, saying that it was, pretty underrealized and janky at times, and not really interesting. And I think you make a fair point that, I don't know, I might call potentially a justification, but let's hope that it was intentional. That you're playing the fantasy of the character you're playing as a little boy matches the kind of flailing that he does when he he doesn't have a lot of moves and that kind of thing. So it's not meant to be a fully fleshed out combat system. Some of the interesting, not necessarily the mechanics of combat, but the encounter design itself, there isn't really much to it, and it's hard to say there is encounter design, but there's a couple little nuances I wanted to mention, both frustrations as well as interesting choices they made. One, there's a couple places where I believe it's unlimited infinite spawning, where and I could be wrong, I just didn't wait it out, but in both cases I did try to kill everything, and usually it looks like it's around where there's some of those energy doors, or energy blocks, and if you have her use that, then it'll basically it'll destroy them entirely. But there's no different visual language for the differences between those encounters. The black pools are not different, the enemies are not different, so you wouldn't know that. And it's always frustrating to me when they switch between infinite spawn and limited spawn encounter designs, and you don't know, right? And so after those happened and I figured out, well, you need to open the doors, whenever there was a long encounter, I kind of would get paranoid that I needed to go look for a door or something, because I wasn't sure how long it was going to last, and it was kind of, my spidey sense that it was lasting too long was kind of going off. But after those couple, they didn't have any more infinite spawns, it seems like. But so that was a little weird thing that I think they could have done a better job, and they could have done something about that. And then the other one that is kind of on the positive that I thought was interesting, I don't know, it's pro and con, but depending, each enemy that would come out of the pools, if they were to get to Yorda, they would pick her up and take her to
the other one, whatever's further away.
Yeah, and I think there was some simple logic to it if you were paying attention, but it was a good contrasting decision versus just picking the closest one, because the player could really game that, and it just added some more tension to whenever she was flown away, that you had to kind of use the button, the look at button, and find her and all that stuff. So some interesting stuff there. And then another little tidbit is their white eyes go out when they're dead.
Yeah, when you get them.
On the final blow, right? So you know that they're gone and you can move on to the next one. So I hadn't noticed that the first time.
I mean, and another thing I think I do like is and I appreciated it more this time, is that there is kind of an encounter arc over the course of the game, because you start off with just the stick, and that you really have to wail on them a long time to kill them with the stick, because they also jump away from you, so you kind of have to catch them landing and stuff like that. So you got to kind of really be a little bit tactical about when you're going to swing. But then you later get a sword, and we'll get to that eventually, and then a magic sword later on, and that kind of by the time you get that magic sword, you have a much bigger battle, and then an even more important battle at the end. So I do kind of like, and we'll talk about that kind of as that's really the 3-act structure, I guess, of the thing. Is the first act ends when we get to the main gate, and it's like, oh, we can get out. I would say, and then maybe it might be, you might call it 4-act, because I guess at the end of the second act you get back to that gate. So it's like the first goal is, we got to the gate, we can get out. Oh, now we have to figure out how to open that, and and you go from there, and then I guess I would say I guess the third act is really just the whole combat there at the end between their two important battles that we'll get to. But I did like that encounter arc a little bit more. It felt like it changed, but not a lot, just enough.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was. We talked about it, I think, in the first episode, and even maybe when we were introducing that we were going to play this game in the last episode of the TIE Fighter stuff. But I think I had said something about the economy of design in their in Ueda's games in general, but in this one specifically. Of course, Shadow does as well with it's such a focused design. But I really had forgotten about how economical it really is. I mean, there's really a simplicity to everything that, as far as like talk about a case study in, less is more and reusing mechanics in interesting ways, but slightly different and unexpected ways, and just like the castle design, and to your point about cohesive kind of systems all interacting with each other, the cohesiveness of the castle. And
it's amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I don't know if I'll have time, but I want to go back, like you were saying with the speedruns and stuff, like the shortcuts and stuff. Yeah. I have a couple theories as I was playing about where some of those might be, but I really want to watch somebody who knows the castle well play it, because I think it's going to be pretty illuminating. But, you just like the presentation, even from the title screen, right? When you see Ico, the title, and you see all of these landmarks that are just right there in front of you, and you will touch every one of them in some way. Not maybe physically, but you will interact with them in some way. Exactly. Yeah. And you're just constantly picking this castle apart, and the castle really is, like I talked about with the Tomb Raider example, we wanted the island to be a character, and the castle is a character. And then I won't jump to the end yet, but what happens at the end of the castle is also a big deal. So this metaphorically, and it's just all wrapped together so nicely.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think we'll probably talk about the castle, because we'll want to talk about sort of what happens story-wise, and we can kind of talk about how the castle, what you're seeing of the castle changes, especially towards the end. Which I'd love, because it's such a nice tied up, and it's such a nice bow. But I guess, we should at least cover a little bit of the story, since we didn't.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Much of it last time. We should sort of cover a little bit of the flow of the levels. So the big story beat that we didn't talk about, but we had played last time, was getting to the main gates. Which was like basically an early goal. Like, you see out a window, there's gates. If we can just get down there, we can get out, and so you make your way there. But when you get there, this queen character appears. And I guess we had seen her before, right? She had spoken to Yorda. No, maybe that's the first time. That's the first time.
That's the first time, I think. Yeah. You just have that vision that dream we talked about, right? Where Yorda is created out of shadow creatures or something like that, and then you're pulled in. Yeah, but I think the queen is a surprise.
Okay, yeah. So and she just turns up and basically slams those doors shut. Yeah. After you do a fairly simple, puzzle where you just pull all these lighted things into position, and oh, cool, the doors are open, and then she turns up and is like, "You didn't think I was going to let you leave?" Yeah, And
I think she says something like, "Yorda can't leave the castle," right, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Which foreshadows a later event. So, your goal, and it just really nicely sets up this goal of like, oh, okay, now your next job is how to get those doors open again. You know, that, well, we did it the easy way, now we got to find the hard way.
Yeah.
And I love how you basically retrack through a little bit and then go back out and try to find your way to get up to these big reflectors. I think those are just so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the I think they call them idols, East Idol and West Idol, I think, or Idol Room or something. Yeah.
The things are called reflectors, but the room might be called
the structure.
The idol room.
The big structure that's
yes.
reflector is behind.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's probably like from Strat Guide stuff. Incidentally, as an aside, I'm looking over at my bookshelf, and I was so obsessed with these games that I ordered a couple import books that are in Japanese that
nice.
I cannot read. That and the Ico one that I got apparently is an officially published story that I've never sought out a translation, but it is like a novella about the story and the game, and I think there's some extra tidbits in there. So I don't really know why I bought it because I can't read it, but just as a collector's item. But
Wow.
But I think the game had enough of an allure to people that that they licensed somebody to write a novel of it. So maybe there's some other tidbits in there. Someday I'll.
Someday you'll learn Japanese and.
I'll look for a translation. But yeah. So anyway, the idols and the reflectors. Yeah, it's those two sections are just so cool. And just again, kind of a little bit going back to the setup of even the title screen or the opening cinematic, where you see those long bridges.
Those long bridges.
Going out there, and you're like, I wonder what those are. Yeah. And the thing is, as opposed to other... I mean, I think we're better as developers at this than we used to be, but, around this era, like the concept of like having a bunch of landmarks or interesting skyboxes or vistas that you never really were going to get to. You know what I mean? They were just there for architectural interest. But like it's not the case in this game, right? You see that stuff, and that is actually the castle, and you will go to those places. Yeah. And the camera work going on those bridges and just like the scale of it all, just really. Really cool.
And there's a lot of places where that turns up and you're just surprised, like, oh, I'm going to get to go down there too. You know, like you didn't know you were going to be able to get down to a place because it just looked like part of the background.
Yeah,
it's terrific. I mean,
an example of that, I forget exactly when you do it, but you go underground a little bit. I think it's to get to the other idol tower thing, the West Tower.
Yes,
you go down under the castle a little bit, and you see water and. A water wheel and some girders and stuff below you, and you just go right by it.
Yep,
and that's where you end up at the end.
And that is just amazing. I mean, how tied together that castle is. Like, it's a real place to me. Even being surprised a couple times because now it's been a few years since the last time I played it, and just being surprised at a couple points, like, oh yeah, this connects this way to that. You forget that stuff, but it comes alive, completely alive. Re-encountering it. I did want to talk about. I think that kind of catches us up to everything we did last time. I wanted to talk about the moment at the windmill. It's the first time it happens, I believe. I may be wrong about this. But
you're talking about the
jump and I'll catch you moment. So why don't you go? Why don't you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think to get a little gripe out of the way, I think this game obviously has no tutorialization explicitly or anything. It's not a very hand-holdy game, no pun intended. And so it tries to do a good job at slowly introducing you in safe ways to interactions with the world, but also interactions with Yorda. And so there's this sort of broken walkway bridge that is just kind of like decayed away. So there's actually a lower section where you can fall and not die, where Yorda could fall and not die. And so they kind of teach you early there where there's this mechanic where you can go on the other side and actually use, she won't come over there with you, of course, because you haven't seen her jump or anything. But if you use the L1 or the R1 button, he'll reach out contextually, reach out his hand toward her, and she will jump over the gap because you were reaching your hand out and calling to her, and she'll grab your hand and then kind of swing down against the base of it, and then you'll pull her up. Yeah. And so they introduce you to that way, and then from there, what Brett's talking about, then in the windmill section, or is that where the actual the more riskier one comes in?
Yeah, I think that's the first time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's an early. Yeah. Anyway, so what they start doing is they start escalating that particular move throughout the rest of the game to kind of start building up this tension between basically kind of like escalating the risk, right, of taking care of her and etc. And if you think about like the interactions in this game, especially between the two of them, I think you could distill it down to that one moment. Whenever she jumps across, whenever you hold your hand out, you're putting your trust. She's putting her trust in you, and she's going to jump across. Later on, it becomes death falls, right, just down to nowhere, mm-hmm. and it's just you, this little kid. She's putting all of her trust and her life in your hand, literally in your hand, and you do it every time, and then you pull her up, and it just gets kind of riskier and riskier. So I love that tension building that they have throughout the game.
And that is another note that we clearly see, in games today.
Yeah.
And specifically, I was thinking of the Uncharted series, but it also happens in Tomb Raider, and other games.
Tomb Raider, that Prince of Persia reboot.
Prince of Persia reboot.
Companion,
Yeah. I mean, it's shown up in a number of places, and what's different. Oh, and I think in Brothers, actually, the
Brothers, yeah.
Yeah. But often
Last of Us.
And Last of Us. Often, what I've noticed about that though is, here, you're controlling the protagonist, and he's the one reaching his hand out to an NPC. And in these other games we're talking about, it's often the other way around, that you're controlling, for example, Nathan Drake, and he is the one who's going to fall.
Yeah.
And, Sully reaches out his hand. And it's interesting how that it works either direction, mm-hmm. to make you care about this NPC. In Ico, it's, I think, the tenderness. You've already got this feeling for her, and this just makes it even, a bigger deal. Whereas in something like, in an Uncharted game where everybody's kind of badass and talks snarky and is sarcastic or whatever, having these moments where that NPC is doing something for you, gives you that sort of moment of, this person does care about me, and therefore I care about them.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well.
Well, and as we'll talk about,
and then they turn it on its head with an enemy.
Right, that's what I was going to say. It builds up with the reversal, and you should keep going through the story stuff, because it's not very complicated. And we finish the game, so we can talk all the way probably to the end. But they do the switcheroo on you for it, but then the other thing that I like about it is that it is an important, sort of thing that Ico does for Yorda, but she's actually a very powerful character in and of herself, right? Like she has this power. She is a key that unlocks. She's clearly a very powerful figure, but she can't do this without you. You know what I mean? And she needs you for certain things.
Yeah, she would still be in that cage.
Yeah, exactly, right, yeah. So there's that, yes, she's the most powerful girl probably in the world or something, but that kind of unlikely hero feel. And if you watch Stranger Things?
I have.
I had this weird Stranger Things moment when I was playing last night where she kind of felt like an 11 kind of character, right? Where she's kind of like a fish out of water, but also super powerful.
That's interesting. That's a really good pull.
I'm wondering if the brothers, the Duffer brothers, I think is their name.
I wonder if they did. That's a good pull.
Their age-wise, they would have played Ico, in their formidable years,
right?
High school or something. So maybe. But anyway. So
well, yeah. I mean, even to dress in kind of general, like, I mean, she wears white. And,
yeah.
You know,
there's
so,
a
lot of similarities. Interesting.
So continue with the story stuff. So we
so we go and I mean we go and we do one tower and then one reflector which basically activates the hinge of one of the doors. It kind of puts all this, I don't know, solar power or something into the door so that it'll be open. But we have to do them both. So then we go back and pass through space that we've been through and now see it in a different way. And we've also picked up a sword. Which lets us cut through ropes that we've encountered beforehand, which is a nice...
Except some ropes, by the way. There's a couple ropes that you can get to that they won't cut, which pisses me off. But
really?
Yeah, so in the water tower section, I made note of it, where you blow the water tower down and it topples?
Yes.
That structure that is kind of the wooden structure that is around there that you're climbing all over...
Yes.
I really looked closely to make sure they weren't chains. They were definitely ropes, and your sword gets close enough to them where you could have cut them.
Oh, and it doesn't cut them.
Maybe technically it's not close enough, but it's close enough to where I would be confused. I was hacking the hell out of those things, and they were not doing anything.
Oh, interesting.
So anyway, quick aside. It's not no game's perfect, but this one is pretty damn close. So
yeah. Yeah, so, and then we, once we can cut ropes with that, we end up doing it a fair amount. You sort of have to leap and cut ropes, and there was one place where you had seen a rope earlier, you might have seen a rope earlier, you basically make your way now to the other side, for the other reflector, and you go into this crazy, like, cavernous area, that, I didn't really remember it being put together that way, and I don't remember what, even now I'm like, I don't quite remember why you go into the caverns versus the other stuff. I will say in that second part, there is my least favorite moment in Ico, which is a water wheel that you have to,
with the spikes on it?
Yeah, with the spikes on it. So you have to jump onto this thing and grab onto the side, so you have to kind of time when you jump. Then you have to quickly climb up and then jump, turn and jump to another area. And I did that, every time I play this game. It takes me 25, 30 times to do this.
Well, and you fall into a stream of water that if you're not careful, you will...
Yeah, well, that part I knew this time. But
I know, but if you're not paying attention...
In the past, I've done it. It takes you a long way away, and it's annoying. Yeah. My least favorite thing is it's kind of the most physically based puzzle. Where it's like this wheel and it's going at this speed and it's really tight. It's the sort of thing where the game hasn't been too crazy, with platforming and stuff, and that one just doesn't really deliver.
Yeah, and it's I think most sort of third-person action adventure and platformery kind of games like this tend to take their mechanics and try to find ways to stretch them.
Yeah.
But they really weren't intended to be used this way. Yeah. And this is a very physics-based, mobility system. And so, you have this turning wheel that has markup on it that you can grab onto, right? But it really, like, having the markup on a wheel, and then grabbing that markup and then standing on top of it, like, it just really wasn't meant to do that well.
No, it's not good at it. That wheel should have been half again as big and turning, a lot slower.
Yeah.
Because that's a really twitchy moment in a game that really hasn't been very twitchy. I feel the same way, incidentally, further on, that there's a place where you have to jump from a chain to another chain, and I missed that 4 times, because it's really difficult to judge how far you're going to go. I mean, because you haven't really done that. Well, I mean, there are places where you swing, but it's never. It's often a lot clearer. Oh, I'm going to be able to jump this far because it's pretty clear. I can line myself up with this thing. It's not really that far. I just have to swing a bit. Another mechanic that isn't taught. but you kind of work it out. Oh, if I push the circle button, it'll start me swinging, just using the momentum.
Well, and then that's the chain swinging and jumping from chain to chain, I think is another knock sort of against, albeit a completely bold decision that they made to have essentially scripted and curated cameras. But when the camera isn't quite where it needs to be for kind of like depth perception, or you are not standing in the perfect place for where the camera makes it really clear. Sometimes, you'll be kind of standing right off center from where the camera wants you to stand, so you think you're jumping in a certain direction, and it's just not.
Just off.
And in other games, usually, like any other third-person mobility-based games, you'll have more control over the camera, so you can actually, position the camera around the rope or chain you're swinging on to really get a better sense of it. But they went all in on their camera choice, and I applaud that. But it again, there's going to be some flaws here and there.
Yeah, I mean, in those cases, I think it's also a little bit tighter space. As well, and so it's not able to give you as much of a view.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a little further on. You do ultimately, you climb all the way up and around. You're much higher. You have the sense that you're really high up, and then you make your way back down.
Great audio design whenever you're high, by the way.
Yeah. I thought it was like a beautiful day outside, and then I realized it was the game. It rained most of the weekend while I was playing. I'm like, oh, the sun's come out. I can hear birds. And then I'm like, oh, no, I can hear the birds in the game.
Also, before I forget, incidentally related to audio, there's almost no music in this game. There's definitely no underscoring, right, throughout most when you're in the castle, and another bold choice for this kind of game. It definitely helps the sort of solitude of it all, but anyway.
Yeah. So you end up getting that second gate open, and then this is kind of the next big story beat, is that, she goes and she uses her power to open the gate. Now that it's kind of powered, she can, I guess make it open like she's made other things open for you. But that takes a lot out of her. And she's like really, really weakened. You have to actually, in order to keep holding her hand, and I actually found by this point in the game, I was like holding her hand all the time. You can't just kind of run and she'll tug along after you like she does most of the game. At this point, she can only kind of go at like 20% speed, maybe. So if she's not going to break that connection, and whenever she breaks that connection breaks because you've tugged too hard, she falls.
She's also limping when she moves.
Yes.
You notice that, yeah. And her hair changes completely white.
Yep.
From gray.
Yeah, it's taken a lot out of her to do this. It's clearly way out at the edge of her kind of ability. And when the door opens and you cross the threshold onto this bridge that you think you're going to escape via, there's actually like a lightning puppet filaments that connect to her hands as you get further out in a cutscene. So just when you think you're going to get away, you've gotten almost halfway across this bridge, this lightning strikes, she falls to the ground, and now you're in a cutscene where you get separated and the bridge starts to part again.
The queen is there, right?
And the queen shows up at this point. And this kind of shell around her starts to project. And once that touches Yorda, you've jumped to try to hold her hand now, which is another inversion of this, like
and
I said.
They give you control for a moment.
They do. You have to get up from the bridge and you have to jump over and grab her hand. So it is an inversion. It's more of like the Uncharted version, where you've got to, jump and have her catch you. You have to trust that she will do it. And unfortunately, the queen shows up and Yorda's not able to maintain her hold on you. And we move into what is essentially, I think, at that point, the final act.
And then, so really a small tidbit there, the effect on the ground that the queen produces is sort of like this shadow that's kind of, a circular shadow that's expanding, and there's kind of like a greenish kind of rim around it.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
And it gets closer and closer to Yorda, and then it kind of envelops her. And
it's very sickly. You know?
It's basically, and then it causes her to stop. You know, you basically lose the grip. But that is the same effect that happens when she is pulled into one of the shadows by the shadow creatures.
Really?
You didn't? Okay, I was going to ask you.
I had not seen it. No, I hadn't.
And then also if.
You mean if she's pulled all the way in?
If she's pulled all the way in, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that never happened.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to mention it.
I'm too good at the game now. I should have let that happen at one point.
Yeah, it happened a few times to me, but it's the same effect with the same green rim. But then also, when that happens, no matter where you are, that thing, if you maybe recall from older playthroughs, that same ring expands out very quickly, and it turns you to stone.
Right.
Wherever you are, which is sort of like a callback to the other sort of, in a way, I think, statues of the boys with horns, you know. So there's sort of this, you know, I feel like that's kind of a small detail about sort of the backstory of all of this stuff, you know, where
how it all.
Yeah, it comes in.
What the mythology is, really. Yeah.
The relationship of the sacrifice and like how she relates to the queen, which you'll get to in a second. But yeah,
actually, and I noticed this time. I pointed out last time that the stone statues inside those little door parts that separate with her magic,
you did.
They themselves, the bigger pieces, are also statues of the little boys.
Yes, inside the structures. They're like inside the stone thing, the column.
The stone thing itself is also a statue of the boy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The square, like the rectangular.
The big rectangular block, is also a representation of the boy with the horns. It's very abstract.
Got it.
Because it stays blocky, but you can. There's one shot where you get a much better side view of it, and you're like, oh, that also has horns.
Fascinating.
And it's like the little boys that are sad that are sitting lower are actually in the hollow of their legs. And sitting on their feet or something like that. Yeah, it's really wild. Once I put that together, I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's a really clever design.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Anyway, so now, and this is, you know, the first time I played it, this section was probably the most frustrating part of the game because you can still die, you know, by missing a jump or something like that. But you can't save anymore because no more Yorda.
There's no more save Yorda. Coaches. There are checkpoints, though.
There are. I don't think they were in the original game, though.
Oh, are you serious? I don't remember. Yeah.
I am pretty sure that I died several times and had to go all the way back to where you land.
That's rough. Well, luckily there's some checkpoints in now.
Or even back to the main menu and have to reload the save. But yeah, there are checkpoints now for sure.
Yeah,
maybe somebody remembers more clearly than I do, but I seem to remember, especially playing it. You fall down and you happen to land on these cages that you can jump between, and I remember jumping between those things way too many times.
Yeah, that could be the case. I had a dreaded feeling when I started that section because it was late and I was like, oh, that's right, I can't save. I'm going to have to finish this thing now. Yeah. And I did die a few times, but luckily there were the checkpoints. One quick back step I wanted to mention, that moment on the bridge when she loses grip on you and you fall. Mm-hmm. The first time I played that, I don't know why, and this was that was one of the seminal moments that everyone was kind of talking about when the game came out, and like people were playing it, and it started, you know, people's ears were perking up about its, you know, how good of a game it was. But I didn't see that moment coming, and I was pretty affected by it at the time. Mm-hmm. I really, you know, I remember getting choked up or whatever, you know, and I think, like I said earlier, it had taken me a while to play through the game because I kept putting it down and blah, blah. So it was a bit of a journey for me. And I probably should have seen it coming, but it's a rough moment.
Well, no, I mean, it is a rough moment, and especially because they build up that trust, like you were talking about earlier, of like they're building up this tension about this connection and how much they can trust each other. And now you're trusting her with everything because you're not going to survive a fall from that height. You know, if you were to even land in the water, you'd be a pancake, you know? And yeah, it's a very affecting moment because
and this concept that you're
it's a total, you know, end of act reversal. too.
Yeah.
Just like you think you're going to be okay, and we'll find some other way, and then the queen shows up, and things go south.
Yeah, structurally very well placed. In the story and etc. And
it's also because you're exiting a different way than you came in. Right. So you can see a forest on the other side, and you're like, oh, okay, this is good because I'm not going back the same way I came, so I don't have to worry about running into my. You basically think, oh, we made it.
That's what I was just going to say. Is it's coupled with this. It's dangling the carrot of freedom right in front of you, and you think you're going to make it. And then you don't. And the queen said, I mean, not that you want to defend the queen, but she said in the courtyard originally that Yorda can't leave.
Yeah.
And so, it all kind of in a weird way ends up being true in that regard. But, yeah. So then you're down.
Yeah, we go underneath the castle, and there's a whole bunch of sort of windmill or I don't know, waterworks type stuff that we, mechanisms that we make our way around, basically to return to the place where we got in when we were originally brought here. And I love
with the boat,
with where the boat is and the sword, the magic sword that opened the doorway originally. When they said get the sword in the first cutscene, now you get that sword. There's a big descent that happens there because you fall a long way, but you're still not all the way down to the water level. So there's you make your way through these waterworks, and then you go to this big descent in this big column, which then takes you all the way down, and you have to get the sword to open the door to get in an elevator to go all the way back up.
Which is the first elevator. Yeah. You came in on. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's terrific.
You actually go back to the original room. Yeah.
Yep, it's a total circularity. It's like I've come full circle to where I started this game. But I've had such a journey getting there.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful structure for a story. I mean, those are my favorite things.
Well, and it just
especially how it all connects together.
It just feels so well planned out. Yeah. And then you get to that room where the sarcophagi are.
Yep.
And
the spice jars of boys.
Right, famously quoted before. And Yorda is there in sort of a statue form, I believe in the form she was in when you were on the bridge, basically, right?
Yes.
The way she was sitting on the bridge as you had fallen. And there are shadow creatures there in the shape of the little boys with horns, and oh man, it's just such a weird full circle in so many ways, right? And then you end up having to fight those things.
Yep, all of them.
All of them.
One for every sarcophagus.
Right, and they're lighting up as you do it, and you're sort of killing the spirits of yourself, right? Or you're the other sacrificed boys. So there's sort of this weird remorse, kind of. For me, at least, there was, because these boys had to go through.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
a real there but for the grace of God go I, type moment.
Yeah.
This is what my fate was going to be.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
To have my mind stripped away to become just this weird shadow guardian, and you get the sense that the other ones might even be perversions of them because they have horns. As well, the other shadow creatures.
Yeah, they're different.
They are different shapes.
Yeah,
one's a bigger, beefier one, and there's one that's got these kind of spiky wings. But these fly around, and they're kind of a pain to battle. But yeah, it's just a fantastic, combat. And it leads you. Once you've destroyed all of those, it leads you to be able to go into the Queen's throne room and confront her. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So you go into the throne room. I think there's because
it's a big story beat.
Another elevator. Yeah, and so and so the Queen reveals. So you kind of walk up to her, and you have your magical sword, and Ico says a few things to her, kind of threatening her, and kind of what have you done to Yorda, and all this stuff. And the Queen reveals that Yorda, actually the plan for Yorda was to to give the queen, eternal life, or to continue her life. And so it's sort of like this fountain of youth kind of concept, where she must have to sacrifice these girls every time she wants to, live, another generation or something. And so very sinister. And as a quick aside, the effects on the queen, the sort of shadowy cards, that they put on there, the visual effects, I thought were for the PlayStation and I'm sure that they're up-resed for this version, but they're really quite successful for being minimalistic.
Yeah,
she's very spooky, and the art direction on her is really amazing. But I guess speaking of,
it reminds me of Shodan.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
because she's just a face, and kind of coming out of something non-human, but this human face,
Yeah. And she's just this very sinister figure, but very, very, very mysterious. And as an aside, I was telling Brett that when I was doing research for the Tomb Raider reboot, I really wanted to push for Japanese mythology being the focal point, and so that's why we kind of placed it in the Dragon's Triangle and placed it on an island and mystery and all that kind of stuff. And I was doing research on sort of ancient Japanese, sort of Chinese influence, ancient kind of native Japanese mythology and culture in the Jomon period and kind of way back, and had discovered that there was this sort of the earliest recorded female queen, Queen Himiko, which ended up being a sort of part of some of the backstory in Tomb Raider. And this sort of like ruler that in the time female rulers were not common, and she became this sort of legendary figure. And I had always wondered, and one of the reasons that I wondered this is some of the artistic design, visual design of ancient Japanese sort of like tapestry and textiles from and sort of design work from the Jomon and sort of that area, the Kofun era, looks a lot like the stuff in these games, especially his tunic, that he's wearing.
Yes,
has very simple lines that are going in that certain shape. And I could be reading more into it than is there, but it's very similar design. And so I'm wondering if if Ueda and their art directors were, if they were influenced by some of the ancient Japanese stuff. And so,
and also the paleness, extremely, very, very light gray, almost porcelain skinned, which is pretty common, a pretty common representation of sort of powerful characters in Japanese mythology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That sort of paleness. You've been seeing it all along in Yorda, but with the queen, it's even more stark because she's got this black shadow, that kind of greasy shadow dripping off of her. It's kind of more coalesced and also forms her a bit. And so it really sets it apart, and she looks even more stark. But, I also thought of like, Okami, or Okami.
That's what I was going to say. Sure. Yeah, she was in Okami as well, I believe, right? As another.
Yeah, and Amaterasu is the wolf, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think a wolf, but is a white wolf, and so I always think, about that because I isn't, if I'm not mistaken, white may be the color of death.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So there's that. I'm no expert, and Tim's probably read a lot more. But that's a bit of how the sausage is made, I guess. You doing all that back research on like.
I kind of got obsessed for a while. Yeah, the Yamatai is another. Yeah, is the area that it was from, and Himiko myth and all that stuff. And I believe I even had read at some point that there was part of the mythology that was obviously because she was Himiko was supposedly a shamanistic, because this was back in Shinto mythology, right? This was before Buddhism had gotten to Japan.
Well, it's when people could fly.
Right.
And turn into animals.
Right, exactly. But the Shinto, so this is the native Japanese, right? So shamanism and non-Buddhist. And so there was this, I think there was a sub-thread about her taking sacrifice to elongate her life as well. And so, I don't know, I just had always kind of assumed that maybe this was some of the inspiration for this character in the game. And she reveals this in the monologue at the end when she's talking to Ico. And so, of course, Ico being who he is, he's not going to stand down, and the battle ensues. And it's a really kind of elegantly designed boss battle. She kind of sends out these pulses of energy that can turn, again, reinforcing the stone, can turn you to stone if you let them touch you, unless you have the sword, which deflects it and kind of creates this really cool looking simple effect that kind of like a shield, where the effect kind of goes washes around you if you're holding it.
Yep.
And then also there are these blocks that you can move around, reinforcing earlier mechanics of moving blocks, where you can actually hide behind them and move them to avoid the blast. And then every time you hit her, she has this protective bubble on. You do some damage to her shield, but then the sword is flung through the air to a part of a room that you have to kind of go in and kind of dodge in between these pulses and time it to go get the sword again, and kind of so you hit her shield multiple times and eventually break the shield, and then you take the sword and you drive it through her heart and take her out.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. What I love too about how that fight is bookended is that both the first and the last time she deflects the sword, so before the battle is joined and after you have plunged it into her heart, the sword is knocked back and shears off. Actually, the first time it's the sword shears off one of Ico's horns, and it bleeds and stuff like that.
That's right.
The second time, it's actually the force of her death releases all this energy, and it throws him across the room, and he lands, and his other horn breaks as his head hits the wall. And it's a great... I mean, it's just like, it's turning him back into a normal boy in a way.
Yeah, it's very
like he's
symbolic.
reclaiming his humanity or something.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting moment.
And then of course, as is a good ending for any kind of epic like this, with the death of the queen, the castle starts falling apart.
Right. And Ico's so badly hurt from being thrown against the wall that he needs to be rescued himself.
Yes. And I forget... Oh, okay, yeah, so she... Yorda's sitting on that sort of disc, right, in the previous room, and all of the spice jars, as Brett calls them, that you have... I forgot to mention this earlier, but this was also a cool minor revelation when I played the game the first time. With every one of those horned... kids, the shadow figures, with every one of those that you kill, it lights up one of those sarcophagi. Mm-hmm. Is it sarcophagi or sarcophagi? Okay. Sarcophagi. And that's how you know how close you are to killing them all. It's essentially a status meter, writ large with the room and its geometry. So that was a cool tidbit that I remember being confused in my first playthrough. I wasn't sure how far I had to go to finish this. I thought it was endless or something. But if you're paying attention, you see them all lit up, and that's important now because you kind of have energized each of those things, and all of the energy from those things basically zaps into the statue of Yorda, and she kind of becomes a fully black, shadowed kind of version of herself with like these tendrily black electrical things kind of like, playing around on the ground as she walks around, and she actually goes and picks you up and brings you down to as the castle is
starting to fall apart.
Is falling apart, Indiana Jones style, and she brings you down to the depths of the castle, to the boat that you came in on.
Yeah, she goes full Willow,
Totally.
It's like her whole body,
Yeah.
Pretty much like Willow started to. But yeah, it's a pretty great moment, because now, you've been guiding her and helping her get through everything, and now she's returning the favor, and returning you back. Since you've opened the doors and stuff, she can just walk you down and into the boat. She just carries you and puts you in a boat, like a forgotten, or an infant.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, she pushes you out like you're in a cradle, or have been sent downstream, and she's saving you. She just kind of pushes you out as this whole thing's coming down around everyone's ears. It's terrific. I mean, it's just, every time I finish this game, I'm just like, oh, it's so good, because the whole castle is falling apart. I mean, it's just a great.
And then it starts sinking.
Yeah, the whole thing.
The whole
sinking into the water. Yeah.
The whole peninsula thing or island that it's on is slowly sinking, and it very and she's there, of course, she stays there, and you're just drifting off.
She can't leave. Yeah. She
can't leave. Yeah, it's just very, very symbolic. So you're floating off, and it's crumbling, and I don't know. Do we want to talk about post-credit stuff now, or?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do it now.
We'll finish that off, and then I have a couple things to come back to, because we're getting up on the hour here.
We're getting late. Yeah.
I want to ask you a couple questions about two questions actually. One kind of technical one, and then one kind of creative one.
Okay.
But yeah, so you get out. I forget actually what happens before the credits. What is the last moment before the credits start rolling? I guess the castle's sunk.
Castle's sinking is, I think, the last moment.
I forget actually. I just finished it last night. I can't remember the last shot. But then it kind of goes into credits, and they're kind of the credits are kind of cool and simple, and they're kind of replaying moments throughout the game in a very kind of nostalgic way.
Yeah.
And then the credits end,
and it's got this music too.
Yeah, and there's this great
English music besides. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, there must have been an equivalent Japanese one, of course, that I've never heard. But so the credits end, and then you have a nice post-credits moment that you wake up on a beach, presumably on the other side of the water, kind of with the cliffs above you that you kind of came in on, right? When the guys came in. And then you get control, and you can run around on this beach. And it's actually a very big beach, and the camera pulls way, way back, and you're like, oh my goodness, what can I do? And you start running, and then you see something on the beach, like this shape far ahead. And of course, the camera's so far back, and Ico's very, very tiny, and you're just running and running and running. And you get up close to this figure, and it's Yorda.
Yeah.
And she's in her original state. She's not the sort of all black version. And there's a great, just really nice shot of her, and then her finger moves, and she wakes up.
Yeah.
And then it's black screen.
And then it says end. Yeah.
It's just freaking.
It's amazing.
What?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so artistically done, because he's really the only color,
in the whole game.
The color bleaches out towards the ocean, so the beach is just blindingly white. It's done very, very well, because there is some vegetation kind of up against the base of the cliff, and the cliff is a little bit green and gray and stuff, but it just fades away into this just blinding white. It's a purely abstract vision of this beach in a way. Mm-hmm. But it's more realistic than so many beaches you've seen in video games, Just you can believe it that it's just the sun is blinding. It's got this white, probably chalky sand or something like that. And it has enough contrast to make that, and when I say it's blindingly white, it's 80% of the screen, in some of these shots where it's just oh my God, and it feels endless,
Well, they must have been using some bloom or something in that, maybe to bloom out that I don't know if they would have had that technology at the time, but they did something to over brighten the beach to make.
They use it in the title.
Yeah, that's true. They do that too. Yeah.
And I feel like they did do that. This may have had, and I'll have to look this up, because there's been a lot of technical investigation of these games, and especially Shadow of the Colossus, that they are kind of early in primitive HDR.
It felt like some sort of HDR precursor or something. Yeah.
So, they definitely.
We were using bloom a lot at the time, trying to fool with that some, right? So
exactly.
Maybe there was some weird thing there.
Yeah, for sure. It's a wonderful moment. Yeah,
and for those who may or may not know, there's actually a secret ending we were talking about pre-show that I forgot how to do it, and so I actually didn't get to do it, but. It's kind of a little cute little thing that there's actually some watermelon kind of tucked away on the beach. If you find them first and bring a watermelon over to her before you discover Yorda, then after she wakes up, there's this little extra cutscene of them eating. They've split the watermelon open, and they're eating it together on the beach, which is adorable and weird. And I think it's associated also with a trophy, by the way.
It is.
Yeah. So anyway.
And I think that also suggests, that they're going to find their way together.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little. It feels a little less poetic than the other one, which is just a great moment. It's just a great image of like, I got to her and she's okay, and that's it. That's all you know. Yeah. Whereas the other one's more like, oh, now we're Robinson Crusoe and we're going to go have other adventures.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that later once we finish Shadow and I have, I don't know when I'm going to get the chance to play Last Guardian, but so I'm really interested to know how that game ends too. But I want to talk about this ending versus Shadow and a couple other things. So remind me when we finish Shadow.
Yeah, for sure.
But my quick question to you that you don't have to go on to too long because you're running out of time. But one kind of macro category that I want to talk about was her AI, and how. What tricks, and I assume there's probably some of this in Last Guardian as I'm hearing people talk about it. Mm-hmm. How would they develop AI like hers? And some examples, for instance, she would act sometimes as a hint for where you needed to go. I don't know if you noticed times when she would actually walk over to where you needed to go to. I had her actually show me a couple things a couple times, and it ended up being like where I needed to place a bomb to blow something up. Right. She would shake her head when she couldn't do something, and then she would sometimes wander off. She would follow you when you were like above her, but she was below. Like there was a lot of really nice, interesting nuance to the way that she acted. And it seemed kind of random. Then maybe it was completely random, and I just applied meaning to what she was doing, as any good AI would trick you into doing.
I think it's probably a little more than that. I feel like, I don't think.
Does she have behaviors? Do you think?
I think she does, and I think they are driven sort of like the Sims are driven in a different way, right? So the Sims, this is a little diversion to how the Sims work, but the Sims have needs, and their needs build up over time. And I mean, this is in the interface, so you can see what's going on in the Sims, right? They have to pee, and they have to eat, and they have to sleep, and they need recreation or something like that. So they have these things that they need, and those things just kind of deplete over time. And the whole game of the Sims is how you satisfy those 6 or 7 urges. I actually think that a similar thing is going on under the covers with Yorda. That she has a need.
Under the covers with Yorda.
Under the cover. Okay. That's my new emo band.
Yeah, that's your fanfic.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to move on.
But no, I think she
There's
has
something more going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she has maybe some need for contact. Yeah. I think she has also a need, for lack of a better term, for wonder.
She seems curious.
Exactly.
And the other clue about to your point about like a need based or sort of some sort of behavioral stuff going on there is after you finish a battle with the shadow, or maybe during a battle with the shadow creatures, if you let go of her or you run away from her, she seems to be clearly in some sort of fear state. Yeah, and she will follow you because she doesn't want to be left alone. Right.
Yeah, I think
some
she has
state changes
a tether, a tether that she cares about as well, and I think that's also going on.
Well, and her animation changes there too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's clearly in a different state. In combat. Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's an intriguing. Maybe as I assume it might come up, you might mention it later, but I bet you. It's kind of a precursor to some of the stuff they do with the Trico creatures.
Oh, absolutely. Right? I mean, that's one of the things when I described it as my game of the year. I said, one of the things that's so magical about Fumito Ueda is that even though I know how this stuff is done, it's still magical to me.
Yeah.
In a way that something like The Sims isn't.
Yeah.
You know, and part of it with The Sims is it's right there in front of you and can see it, but
it's a little more academic though.
Yeah, but here it's more, since you don't know exactly what those are, even if you know that that's how it's likely achieved, you know, it's like, oh, there are probably places in the world that are beacons for wonder. Like, so if she's feeling curious, you know, because she hasn't interacted with those in a while because you've been tugging her along or something like that, she'll go look at it on her own. You know, and that'll maybe satisfy that. I mean, it's possible, though, of course, to entirely simulate that in such a linear controlled game by just scripting it all. Scripting all those bits.
Yeah,
now, in terms of where she wants to walk, like in certain areas, you just be like, oh, well, if they're not together, then have her walk here, you know.
Yeah.
You could very much see it being done that way. But the game had a dedicated AI programmer.
Yeah.
Just for Yorda. So.
Yeah, and you know, whether it be Republic Commando or a few other examples, like, and we had a lot of companion AI stuff in Halo 5 as well, but that stuff is no joke. I mean,
it's hard work.
This is very complicated. So even having just her in this puzzle game that's fairly simple and mechanically and systemically, still hard. Like, you know, I would leave a room and come back, which we didn't even talk about the timer of kind of leaving her alone, but we should move on. But I would come back to a room and she's standing, it's like she had completely climbed the ladder and is in a total different place since I was gone, and she's standing next to the switch I need to use.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, there's something going on there.
Yeah, I had a moment like that as well, and I think that those are, especially when she's on her own for a long time. And there are places you can leave her for quite a while, especially if you're doing a speed run. You know, there are places where you're like, you want to leave her behind because you don't want to have to lead her through all this stuff. There's tons of time lost if you do that. So
yeah, but there's also that timer that if you leave her alone too long, but
that they'll come
but some
not
places.
not in every place.
Yeah.
So it is pretty. It's an amazing achievement. You know, I think you see in Trico this stuff just taken to a maximal degree, just absolutely insane amount of. You know, just making that feel like a real creature. I mean, Yorda feels human, but a little alien. You know, and that's okay. She seems like a person who hasn't seen the outside. You know,
it's in character.
Yeah. Whereas Trico is a bit different that way, and maybe we'll talk about him a little bit more later. But because he is sort of a mix of Yorda and maybe a Colossus, so he's He's a wonder.
My final quick question, which we're running out of time, so we can make it quick. What was your favorite puzzle / room experience? Because we kind of we went through the whole game, but we kind of didn't talk too much about specific.
We didn't talk too much about the puzzles. When I first played it, I played this in the demo. I really loved the windmill. Yeah,
that's a cool section. Yeah.
You know, I really loved.
The concept of jumping on the windmill for the first time and having hold on to it and have it turn
and drop, yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And I think, I think that's probably my favorite from a straight playthrough. My favorite, sort of the surprises that come from not knowing how the castle is connected, and then seeing a 2-hour run, and. Like, oh, I can leave her there, and so basically you can leave her in that first combat room, and then go and hop on the coal cart, and now you don't have to do any combat because she's not with you. Take that coal cart down to the other end and hop up and go and jump down on the cube, and there's a switch there, and you can open the switch and then just grab her and keep going. And it takes you no time at all because you don't have to fight anything. Nobody's after her. You don't have to lead her through this stuff. You don't have to raise and lower this block a couple times to get her, to go. And you just save all this stuff. It would not be the way to play the game because you miss all this building of empathy between the characters. But as a speed run, it's kind of like, oh, that is so clever that's just connected there. Yeah. And that I can leave her there that long, it's just neat. Yeah. So I do like that as well. I mean, that's probably my favorite. Like, oh man, I didn't know it connected that way kind of moment. And there were a couple places where I was like, there's that tunnel with the water in it, and
down below with the grates.
Yes, yeah, with the grates, and
you have to pull her.
You have to pull her up above, and it's like the simplest, stupidest thing to do.
I got stuck there.
And every time I snag on it for a minute, because there's 2 blocks that you can stand on, her on one and you on the other one. And you think, oh, I must need to do this, but no, you just have to go and just ask her to come and grab your hand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a misleading,
but you come back to that room, later. So it's,
yeah, your point about the windmill moment, that I want to reference it. I'll reference it again when we talk about Shadow, because I remember a specific moment in that game too. But the windmill moment was, for me, it reminded me that there's every one of these games for me. There's probably a couple of the examples, but one in particular where I think to myself, they're not going to let me do this, are they? This isn't what they actually want me to do. Mm-hmm. And then it works. And it is what they want me to do. And you kind of, in the windmill one, is kind of a very simple one. It's not really like a big grand moment or anything. But the concept of kind of, again, bending the mechanics to do something unexpected. And that sense of sort of delight that you get with that kind of revelation, which is, we've talked about it with Day of the Tentacle or other games where, you kind of put 2 and 2 together and you feel like a smart badass. But that little moment was great. And for me, the first time you open up all the doors for the reflector on the first, that the sort of the reflector rooms and all that stuff. Those
figuring out that you can light the things,
the lighting, and like all of the sequence of that first one. Just
is very
such
good.
A memorable sort of multi-step puzzle.
It's a whole, and it's very compact. There's so much to do in that one area because you gotta open these 3 windows, but then there's also this. You have to lower this drawbridge in order to open the last one.
And that's also the moment we didn't mention when you're like, what is this? How am I supposed to get over there? Yeah. And then you bring her up there, and
these blocks appear.
These blocks appear, Indiana Jones style or something, and you're like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, you had to turn off this water so that she could follow you, and like there's just this. And that's all happening in the same space as this other major puzzle of just opening these big windows basically, so that you can, power the door that the main gate you want to get out.
And the payoff is great because you just see that really energy and
it's a nice cutscene that and it's all in engine. It's all just running. Game. It's the same stuff. The whole game's just running in engine. It's really lovely. Gave him some fits, I think, on the PS2 because it was definitely pushing the horsepower, but on the PS3 it runs smooth as silk. So I never really noticed much slowdown. A couple times probably, but nothing major at all. Fantastic game.
Yeah, it's one for the books.
I think we can actually just kind of wrap up now because we're almost at an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, we don't have any feedback this week, so we can just kind of do the outro. Mm-hmm. The first thing, of course, is that we're next going to immediately turn our attention to the second of Fumito Ueda's games, and that's Shadow of the Colossus, which has the capsule review is it's a adventure game with 16 boss battles, but nothing else, which I think is underselling its pleasures, but yeah, it makes it easy at least to divide it up. I guess we'll play 8 and 8. So play the first 8 Colossi, and we'll start discussing that in a week. So yeah, that'll be really terrific.
I'm really looking forward to that.
That is one I have not played other than to show certain sections to people since it came out. So I haven't played it all the way through since it came out, and there is a different sort of overall emotional feeling to that game that we'll discuss. But there is also a common emotional feeling that we'll discuss as well. So I think that is the one thing that's really interesting about Ueda's emotional tones is that there's always a tinge of melancholy. Mm-hmm. There's always a bit of darkness, and here he's pairing it with this tenderness, which was so unusual at the time, and we'll talk about Shadow of the Colossus and what he pairs it with there for sure next time. Yeah. So I guess in the meantime, we would love some feedback. I know a lot of you are listening. We appreciate that you're listening, and we'd love to hear what you think. So send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com, or rate us on iTunes and maybe put a review in there with a couple sentences letting us know what you think. And hey, tell a friend. We had Cameron. Cameron, was it Haas? I think. I'm sorry. I'm looking it up because I'm like, I think it was Cameron Haas. Yeah, Haas. Last time, and he had sent the long thing about Myst. He followed up again and said, you know what? It's okay. I've decided you just have to play Myst. You don't have to play Riven. That was overly harsh. So he appreciated that we read his feedback. So thanks for sending that in and letting us off the hook there, Cameron. And his wife agreed too. So we've got her in our corner.
God, talk about a game I haven't played in a long time.
No kidding. I haven't played that. I only played that once. It's been a long time.
And talking about getting stuck. In an age where the internet was not as prevalent,
Yeah, it would be fun to talk about how stuck you could get in that game, because I got stuck because of audio issues, driver problems.
Oh,
there's an audio puzzle in that game.
Right. I remember.
Guess what you can't solve if your audio doesn't play that? Brutal. Yeah, anyway, we'll get back to that. In the meantime, if you want to follow us individually on Twitter, the podcast is at DevGameClub. I am at Brett_Duville, and he's
at Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Yeah, and we'll see everybody in a week's time for Shadow of the Colossus. In the meantime, good night.
Good night.
Actually made me think of Totoro, having that song at the end.
Yeah,
because Totoro, exactly. It has a song at the end that's in English, and you're kind of surprised.
Yeah,
if you're watching it in English.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Who plants the seed? So do you know what I ended up calling the shadowy figures that attack you?
In Ico?
Yeah, in Ico.
No, what do you mean?
I started calling them Trumps. They're horny, shadowy figures who are trying to grab your girl. So there you go.
Well done. Just to yourself, like when you're in your
just to myself, just sitting here playing the game.
Great.
Here come those Trumps.
Here come the Trumps, and we're gonna kill them all.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Good
job.